The next half an hour, we will be looking beyond the business headlines by giving you in-depth perspective on the stories that are affecting all of us, from pension scheme, foreign exchange, crude oil, and gross domestic product. Well, hello and welcome to Business This Week on Viewer Television. My name is Joy Mali. But before we give you the stories and details, let's go on a quick break, and when we return, Business This Week continues. So stay tuned. Welcome back to a new chapter of Business This Week. Well, coming up on today's show is pension scheme, and then we'll look at foreign exchange, then move over to crude oil, and then gross domestic product, and then we'll also take a look at tax burden, and then stock market. We'll talk about the stock market, and then we'll also talk about the Naira redesign and how it has affected everyone in the country, and then we'll also talk about currency swap, and then the e-Naira. And then we'll also talk about polls controversy, and then economic report, and then IMF report, and then economic value, and then we'll also take a look at a quick look at electronic equipment, and then lastly we'll end the program with oil production. But first, let's start with pension scheme and how the National Assembly has passed a bill to exempt its workers from the scheme, and then 18 years after operating the contributory pension scheme. However, the Pension Fund Operators Association of Nigeria has said that the passage of the bill sets a dangerous precedent for Nigerian workers. PENOP is the umbrella body for all pension fund administrations and pension fund companies. Now, PENOP reacted in a statement titled "An in quote exemption of the National Assembly staff from the contributory pension scheme matters arising." Now, expressing concerns regarding the way the bill was passed, it stated that the passage of the bill seemed to have been unnecessarily expedited and shrouded in secrecy, with very little engagement and input from critical stakeholders, as it was passed during the National Assembly's recess. Now let's take a look at foreign exchange and how the Nigerian Economic Group Summit says Nigerians' weak manufacturing is a major factor fueling shortage of foreign exchange. Now, the NESG senior economist Dr. Wilson disclosed this in a recent paper published by Foresight Africa. Well, the report titled "Unquote Nigeria in 2023, Bridging the Productivity Gap and Building Economic Resilience" stated that the last 7 years of the country had been plagued with hardship, especially after battling two economic recessions. Well, he urged the incoming administrators to work with stakeholders and develop an agenda for economic and social inclusion. Well, on the crude oil sector, crude oil production, which accounts for around two-thirds of government revenue and 90% of its foreign exchange reserves, contracted by 13% year-on-year in the fourth quarter of last year. That's what the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics has said. Now, the Bureau, in its latest report, said Nigeria recorded an average oil output of 1.3 million barrels per day in the fourth quarter, lower than the daily average of 1.5 million BPD registered in the same quarter of 2021. While the price of diesel, which many businesses rely on to generate electricity, has soared in Nigeria due to high global oil prices, leading it to increased cost of production. Well, the NBS report comes on the heels of the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries monthly oil market report for January, which showed that Nigerian oil recount had been on an upward trajectory in the last 1 year. Well, on the gross domestic product, Nigerian's insurance industry grew by 12.5% in the fourth quarter of 2022. And the figures were obtained from the National Bureau of Statistics. And then, according to the NBS report, the Nigerian gross domestic product for quarter 4 2022, the finance and insurance sector consisted of two subsectors: financial institutions and insurance. While the former account for 92.84%, the latter contributes 7.16% to the sector's growth in quarter 4. It added that the sector's contribution to the nominal GDP was 3.30% in quarter 4 2022, higher than the 3.10% it represented the previous year, and higher than the contribution of 2.83% it made in the preceding quarter. Now let's take a look at tax burden. Well, the indirect tax burden on Nigerians rose by 18.88% to 3.3 trillion naira in 2022 amid an economic downturn and rising inflation. Now, according to the National Bureau of Statistics, Nigerians paid about 3.3 trillion naira as indirect tax in 2022, an 18.88% increase from the 2.57 trillion that was paid in 2021. This is based on current basic prices. Indirect taxes and taxes, which include value-added taxes, customs or import duties, paid to the government by a producer or later passed on to a final consumer. Rising inflation has contributed to increased economic hardship in the country. In 2022, inflation pushed 5 million more Nigerians into poverty. Between 2020 and 2021, inflation pushed about 8 million more Nigerians below the poverty line, pushing the total number of poor people in the country to 90 million. With the increase in inflation, the purchasing power of Nigerians has greatly eroded. According to the global market, the Global Bank, the value of minimum wage fell by 55% from 30,000 naira in 2019 to 19,355 naira in 2022. Now, on stock market, the first day of trading in the week closed positively for investors on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, as it gained about the 207 billion naira on Monday. Now, the all-share index grew by 0.69% to reach 55,328.42 on Monday from 54,949.21 recorded at the end of the trading last Friday. Well, the market capitalization also increased by 207 billion naira to 30.140 trillion naira from 29.933 trillion naira recorded last week. 149.7 million of shares valued at 1.542 billion naira were traded in 3,186 deals. Now, thus far, the market has advanced by 370 37 million base points since the markets opened in January. The year-to-date return stood at 7.23%. The market breadth also closed positively with 28 gainers and 9 losers. Well, let's take a look at Naira redesign. We know how the Naira redesign affected everybody in the country with lack of cash, and even the POS operators were actually proving so stubborn to remit cash, even as the CBN ordered that banks should circulate money. Some banks actually held some money, and Nigerians went into, I would say, depression because lack of money can cause depression. Well, let's take a look at Naira redesign and how the total amount of currency in circulation in the country dropped from 3.29 trillion naira as of the end of October 2022 to 1.38 trillion as of the end of January 2023 as a result of the new Naira redesign policy of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Now, figures obtained from the CBN show this represents a drop of 1.91 trillion in the 3 months period. Well, the governor of Central Bank of Nigeria, Godwin Emefiele, had in October 2022 announced plans to redesign the old 200 naira, 500 naira, and 1,000 naira notes. Now, Godwin Emefiele also announced deadlines for Nigerians to swap their old with the new note. He decried the challenges associated with currency management, including significant hoarding of banknotes by members of the public, with statistics showing that over 80% of currency in circulation was outside the vaults of commercial banks. According to the Apex Bank, analyses of the currency in circulation show that a large and increasing proportion of the naira outside the commercial banking system was held by the general public, who hold a lot of new naira banknotes. Well, let's take a look at currency swap, and amid the crisis trailing the naira redesign, angry traders have begun to defy the Central Bank of Nigeria's order banning the use of 1,000 naira and 500 naira notes as legal tender in the country. Now, reports gathered that the weekend and on Monday revealed that some traders had started accepting the old currencies in exchange for goods and services at a premium. This came barely 2 weeks after President Muhammadu Buhari, during a national television broadcast, ordered the CBN to recirculate the old naira notes. Buhari's directive followed the expiration of the February 10th deadline stipulated by the Apex Bank for phasing out of old notes. Now, the president also stopped the use of old 1,000 naira notes and 500 naira notes as legal tender. However, following a mass protest over the scarcity of new notes, the CBN ordered deposit money banks to begin the collection of old 1,000 naira notes and 500 naira notes from the customers, even while they remain a non-legal tender. However, the latest findings have shown the traders have started accepting the old 500 naira and 1,000 naira in exchange for goods and services, despite the government's ban on them as legal tender. Well, we all know that the governor of CBN, Godwin Emefiele, has banned the use of a 1,000 naira note and 500 naira note as legal tender, and it's actually not a legal tender anymore. But some of the traders out there actually collect those old notes in exchange for goods and services. Well, it actually has gotten to that level that they literally do not want to listen to the government anymore because there's actually no money, and the only money that's available is the old naira note. Well, now that the election, the whole presidential election is over, I pray and hope that the new currencies will begin to circulate properly. Well, you are still watching Business This Week on Viewer Television. Well, let's go on a quick break, and when we return, Business This Week continues. So stay tuned.
Two souls came together. Came together to
Tat Fragrance, the new luxury fragrance for men and women.
Good morning, gentlemen. I'm at the Envoy Hotel, Diplomatic Drive 305, here for a business weekend. It's been an amazing stay. Conference hall and business facilities here are stylish and innovative. The Envoy Hotel is luxury, esoteric, opulent, for ultimate comfort.
Discerning travelers, we are more than just a place to stay. We are an icon of comfort, style, and thoughtful luxury. We are Envoy Hotel.
Well, welcome back. If you're still just joining us, this is Business This Week on Viewer Television. Now let's take a look at the e-naira and how the Nigerian Central Bank digital currency has been extended to future phone users with the unveiling of the e-naira USSD channel. Now, the channel would enable subscribers to cash in and out of the e-naira platform using USSD, an innovation the promoter of the scheme said would increase its speed of adoption. Well, the Chief Executive Officer of Bullnet, the company behind the e-naira enhanced service, Bayo Akintoye, said the innovation would bring millions of unbanked Nigerians into the financial system. He described the service as a game changer in the implementation road, saying it will enable users to cash out through the automated teller machine without necessarily the use of account debit cards. He noted that the network of banking agents across the country would become e-naira extension workers and would be selling vouchers to customers at a profit while onboarding new users. Well, oil marketers, let's take a look at polls controversy and how oil marketers said many depots had stopped loading and fuel due to the apprehension caused by the collation of results of the general elections across the country. Now, it was also gathered that's why filling stations operated by major marketers and the Nigerian Petroleum Company Limited were selling petrol between 194 and 200 naira per litre. Other outlets operated by independent marketers dispensed the product between 250 naira and 340 naira. This was despite the insistence of the federal government that there was no approval for an increase in the pump price of petrol, coupled with the government demand that PMS should not be dispensed above the approved rate. while NNPCL retail stations are believed to be selling PMS at the approved price. Many of them sell the commodity at 194 or 195 naira per liter, but independent marketers dispense the product far higher than this rate. Well, the federal government has announced that they actually have no hand in increasing the price of fuel, but some retailers out there are actually increasing the price of fuel. For instance, when I traveled to Port Harcourt, the a liter of fuel in Port Harcourt is around 600 naira per liter. That is the price of fuel in a filling station, not a black market, a filling station. I'm telling you. But then how much do you think the retailers out there would sell the price of fuel? I mean, this is not necessary, because they are actually. I feel they are putting more blames on the election, but this has nothing to do with the election. This is greed, and I feel it is actually not right at this state. Yeah, we are the cause of our problems. I feel we are the cause of our problems and not the government. Well, let's take a look at economic reports and how the foreign exchange inflows into Nigeria's economy fell year on year by 40% to $32 billion in the first 11 months of 2022, from $44.1 billion in the corresponding period of 2021. Data from the Central Bank of Nigeria monthly economic report showed that aggregate foreign exchange inflow into the economy was $63.57, representing a 26% decline compared with $86.34 billion in the 11 months of 2021. Now data also show that foreign exchange outflow fell by 2% to $37.2 billion in 11 months 2022, from $37.96 billion in 11 months of 2022. Outflows through the Central Bank of Nigeria rose by 2.14% to $30 billion in 11 months, from $26.37 billion in 11 months of 2022. In the report, the CBN noted that on a monthly basis, net inflows through it rose by 16% to $2.2 billion in November 2022, from $1.74 billion in October 2022. Well, on IMF reports, the International Monetary Fund has disclosed that only 24% of loans disbursed under the Anchor Borrowers Program of the Central Bank of Nigeria have been repaid. This disclosure was contained in the IMF Selected Issues paper on Nigeria, which was prepared by a staff team of the fund as background documentation for the periodic consultation with the country. It was noted that document was based on the information available as of the time it was completed on January 12, 2022. Now, according to the IMF, agricultural credit in the country has not significantly boosted production, even though there is the challenge of getting the right recipients for the credit. The IMF have noted that although the CBN allows farmers to pay in kind or cash under the ABP, repayments have been very low. Well, banks credits to the private sector rose from 35.18 trillion naira recorded at the end of January 2022 to 42.25 trillion in the corresponding period of 2023. Well, the CBN's money and credit statistics indicated this amount to a rise of 7.7 in the year one period. Well, the figures also show that total credit rose to 30.41 trillion naira as at the end of January 2021, from 26.65 trillion at the end of January 2022. While delivering the Monetary Policy Committee report in January, the CBN Governor Godwin Emefiele said the committee reviewed the performance of the bank's various interventions aimed at stimulating production and productivity across the real sector. Well, under the 100 for 100 policy on production and productivity, he said the bank had disbursed 20.78 billion naira to 9 projects in healthcare, manufacturing, and services. Well, let's take a look at economic value and how stakeholders have called on the federal government of Nigeria to implement a ban on single-use plastic. Well, the stakeholders who spoke at the Global Alliance for Incineration Alternatives Nigerian members workshop on civil society organizations' engagements with national and international plastic policy processes in Lagos recently stated that the ban should take effect in 2024 instead of the 2028 date contained in the proposed national policy on plastic waste management. They also suggested that the ban should start with the styrofoam, microbeads, carrier bags, plastic spoons, straws, and disposable cups as they had no economic value, recycling potential. Well, on electronic equipment, the federal government has commenced the registration of importers of electronic equipment across the country in a bid to regulate the activities and curb e-waste. Now, the National Environmental Standards and Regulations Enforcement Agency stated in a statement that it had developed a guide for importers of used electronic equipment to manage e-waste in Nigeria adequately. Now, NESREA, in the statement issued to announce the inauguration of Interagency Committee by its Director General, Professor Aliyu, disclosed that the Interagency Committee, which is made up of officials of the agency and the National Broadcasting Commission, was set up to strengthen the collaboration between the two agencies in the management of e-waste. Well, let's take a look at oil production and how the federal government has identified new oil fields capable of delivering about 681,000 barrels of crude oil per day and 1.52 billion standard cubic feet of gas daily. Well, it disclosed this in a new document put together by the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission titled, and in quotes, Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Sector, Value Optimization, Energy Transition, and Regulatory Perspectives. Well, in the document obtained by Newsman, the Chief Executive NUPRC Benga explained that incremental volumes of crude were expected from new wells and well re-entry. He further noted that the implementation of host community provisions under Sector 235 of the Petroleum Industry Act 2021 saddled the Commission with the responsibility of ensuring conducive and peaceful relationship among stakeholders with the host communities. Well, that's all I have time for today, but next week and same time, 3:30 p.m. We'll give you more in-depth stories, and we'll also have a guest in the studio with us that will talk Forex and explain everything you need to know about Forex. Well, see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business stories on Business This Week. Goodbye.